Hello and welcome to the podcast where we share the best short stories that ever written from around the world to discuss some issues of life. Today, we are going to talk about The Bet by Anton Chekhov, a Russian writer who is considered one of the greatest masters of short fiction. The Bet was published in 1889 and explores the themes of life and death, freedom and confinement, and money and morality. The story begins with an old banker who remembers a bet he made with a young lawyer 15 years ago. They were at a party where they debated whether capital punishment or life imprisonment was more humane. The banker argued that death was better than a long and miserable life in prison, while the lawyer claimed that life was always preferable to death, no matter how hard it was. The banker challenged the lawyer to prove his point by spending 5 years in solitary confinement, and offered him 2 million rubles as a reward. The lawyer accepted the bet, but raised the stakes to 15 years. Next day, the lawyer was locked up in a cottage in the banker's garden, where he had no contact with the outside world except for books, music, wine, and cigarettes. He could write letters, but not receive them. He could not see anyone or hear any human voices. He had to endure this isolation for 15 years, or else he would lose the bet. The story then follows the lawyer's transformation over the course of his imprisonment. Next day, the lawyer was locked up in a cottage in the banker's garden, where he had no contact with the outside world except for books, music, wine, and cigarettes. He could write letters, but not receive them. He could not see anyone or hear any human voices. He had to endure this isolation for 15 years, or else he would lose the bet. The story then follows the lawyer's transformation over the course of his imprisonment. In the 10th year, he reads only the New Testament and becomes religious. In the last 2 years, he reads everything from Shakespeare to natural sciences, without any apparent order or preference. The day before the lawyer is supposed to be released, the banker is in a desperate situation. He has lost most of his fortune and cannot afford to pay the lawyer 2 million rubles. He decides to kill the lawyer and avoid paying him. He sneaks into the cottage at night with a revolver, but finds the lawyer asleep on a table with a letter addressed to him. The letter says that the lawyer has renounced the money in the bet, because he has learned more than any man in the world during his confinement. He says that he despises everything that people value in life, such as wealth, fame, power, and happiness. He says that he is going to break out of his prison 5 hours before the time is up, and asks the banker to consider himself a winner. Aimed by the letter. He realizes that he has wasted his life on money and greed, while the lawyer has gained wisdom and enlightenment. He kisses the lawyer's head and leaves the cottage quietly. He orders his servants not to wake up the lawyer until noon. The next day, he learns that the lawyer has escaped through a window before dawn. That's all for today's episode of our podcast. Thank you for listening and stay tuned for more short stories.